Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The desert morning came up hard and bright over Redstone Canyon, the kind of heat that baked dust into the seams of your gear before noon. Morales raised a clenched fist and the squad slowed, boots grinding over gravel as they moved in staggered file along the canyon floor. The walls ran high and red, cut by ledges and broken shelves that made you feel watched even when nothing moved. Ryan kept the radio snug to his ear, catching the scratch of distant traffic from Fort Bragg, Patterson's voice calm, clipped, reminding them the route was a likely corridor for a weapons convoy. "Copy," he answered, then glanced at Morales for the next hand signal. Ethan breathed through his mouth to cut the dust, eyes tracking the ridges the way they taught him, corner to ledge to shadow. First real patrol that felt like it mattered. He kept close to Jimmy, whose M249 rode his chest like a dare. Jimmy didn't talk much on approach. He watched angles and counted steps. When he did speak, it was short and steady, the kind of tone rookies borrowed until it stuck. Above and away, where the wind cut cleaner, Laura lay prone under a strip of desert camo net at the Desert Ridge Outpost. The glass on her scope was clean. The bipod sat dead still. She read the canyon like a checklist: mirage boil near the far bend, light crosswind off the south wall, shimmer over a white chalk patch that could distort a long shot by inches. She didn't need to say anything. Her job was to be there first and be quiet. If the ambush came, she would be the thing that changed it. Morales scanned with binos from a crouch, jaw tight. Redstone was a choke point, beautiful for a postcard and perfect for a trap. The map said the path threaded down to a narrow dogleg and opened again, like a mouth swallowing you twice. He tapped 2 fingers, eyes up. The line shifted. Ethan adjusted his helmet, felt sweat run down his neck, kept moving. Patterson checked status boards 3 time zones away, the canyon outlined in green on a slab of glass and steel. Major Grant stood behind her, arms crossed, saying little. He didn't crowd operators. He watched trends, gaps, delays, the places where routine got thin. He asked one question, weather in sector, and nodded at the answer. Out here, the heat told most of the truth. The first hour was quiet enough that boots and canteens sounded loud. They crossed a spill of small stones where a side gully dumped into the main lane. Morales paused, studied scuffs near a boulder, fresh edges on a footprint, not theirs. He held the halt longer than anyone liked and then waved them forward in twos, bounding cover to cover, rifles up. Jimmy took rear for a stretch, then swung up when the canyon pinched and the team needed weight in front. Laura watched a hawk ride thermals until it vanished against the pale sky. She listened to air, to the small hiss you get when wind hits a cliff line just right. She checked distance to the dogleg, rechecked drop tables she knew by heart, and dialed a click she might never need. Her breathing stayed slow. Patience was its own weapon. Ryan got Patterson again, quick check, position update, time to bend, no contact, comms clean. He could hear his own heartbeat between words. He looked at Ethan, rookies always wear nerves on the face, gave the kid a nod. "You're fine. Keep your eyes busy." Ethan nodded back, swallowed grit, and did what he was told. They made the dogleg at a crawl. The walls leaned in, close enough that voices would bounce if anybody used them. Morales put 2 men on the right, 2 on the left, and took center with Ryan tucked behind him. He hated tight places forced you to trust what you couldn't see. He raised his hand, breathed once, and gave the move signal. Somewhere beyond the bend, a pebble ticked down rock. Just one. Ethan heard it. Jimmy heard it. Morales went still and the line froze with him. 30 seconds stretched. Nothing. Dust floated, sun hammered, the canyon waited. Morales slid the beanos up, scanned the upper shelves, saw a seam in shade that didn't match. Could have been nothing. Could have been a barrel tucked behind burlap. He let the glasses fall, lifted 2 fingers, pointed high left, high right, then tapped his plate, ready posture. Laura saw it too, but from a different angle, the wrong geometry in a stack of stones, a dark pocket with a straight edge where nature didn't draw straight. She shifted a foot, no more, to keep her silhouette flat. The wind softened, dragged heat back across the floor of the canyon. She kept her finger off the trigger and her mind on the clock. If it broke, it would break fast. Ethan felt the world narrow to the small triangle between his front sight and the place Morales had pointed. He wasn't thinking about home or training or what-ifs. He was counting the seconds it would take to hit dirt if rounds started snapping. He had practiced it 100 times, but practice didn't heat your arms or sting your eyes. This did. Ryan's radio breathed static, then a clipped tone like someone keyed and let go without words. He frowned, adjusted the earpiece, tried for Patterson, status check again, got her back, clear, steady, unaware of the canyon's held breath. Copy, he said, and wished he hadn't said anything at all. They pushed the last 10 yards to the mouth of the bend. Morales rolled his shoulder to settle the strap and brought his rifle up a hair, muzzle just off the edge. He looked once more to the ridgeline, the same place he'd looked the last 5 times, and let instinct file what his eyes found, a hint of fabric where there shouldn't be, a glint with a shape behind it, still as stone. He raised his fist to drop them low. On the ridge, Laura's cheek settled deeper into the stock. The reticle floated where it needed to be if the worst came. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She counted wind, counted heat, and held the line only a sniper sees. The canyon exhaled. Then everything moved at once. The first burst ripped across the bend, hard and sudden, sparks kicking off the rock at Morales's cheek. He dropped, yelled contact, and the squad scattered to whatever cover the canyon would give. Ethan hit the ground behind a flat boulder, breath punched out of him, helmet clacking stone. Jimmy swung the M249 up and sent a harsh reply, short bursts to mark lanes, brass skittering down the slope. Ryan slid in beside Morales, keying his handset, voice sharp. Ranger element at Redstone Canyon taking heavy fire, grid as briefed, request immediate support. He didn't wait for an answer, he had to move the net alive between calls. Rounds shredded dust into a fog that stung eyes and stripped sound into clicks and pops. Morales peeked, saw muzzle flashes braided into the shelves high left and right. Classic L-shaped ambush. He wanted to curse and didn't. He wanted better cover and didn't have it. He started cutting the picture downtown to simple rules: suppress, shift, bound, survive. He jabbed a finger at Ethan and 2 others, left shelf, short bursts, don't burn your mags. He pointed Jimmy right, break their rhythm. Jimmy set the bipod against a ledge and hammered, the gun chattering in his hands like it wanted to run away. Up on the ridge, Laura pressed her cheek harder into the stock. She watched the ambushers lean into it, confident from height and angles. Her scope floated to one who exposed too much shoulder behind a sandbag wall. She checked the light crosswind again, a hair stronger now, and let the reticle settle a breath to the left. Squeeze. The Barrett bucked, a flat thunder that rolled the canyon. In her glass the target folded, a neat drop behind cover that wasn't cover anymore. She worked the bolt and moved half a body width, unwilling to give them a place to shoot back. Ethan felt the boom like someone hit the stone with a sledge. He didn't see the target fall, but he felt the beat in his chest change. He popped up, sent 3 rounds where Morales marked, dropped again as chips of rock cut his sleeve. His hands stopped shaking. Not much, but enough. Ryan shouted over the gunfire, unknown friendly long gun, high ridge, use it, move on her shots. Morales nodded, didn't look up, and started the bound. 2 up, 2 cover, shift right. Simple, loud, old. Patterson's board flashed a red tile, comms spike, contact report. She straightened, voice calm as she fed the request to Grant. He leaned over the console, eyes steady. Rotary wing not close. Fixed wing farther. He asked time to station, the numbers weren't good. He told Patterson to keep the line open and to get updates on ammo and casualties. She relayed, clean and even, the tone you give to people who need certainty when they can't have it. On the floor, Morales heard her, clipped and present like a hand on your shoulder that you can't feel. Copy, he said, and hauled Jimmy to a better angle as Ethan and another rifleman sprinted past to a new slab of rock. The enemy felt the shift and poured rounds at the move. Chunks of canyon wall snapped away. Ethan dove, boots scraping, whipped his rifle back up and shot at a flash that popped too high. He missed clean and didn't take it personal. He slid a fresh mag and checked Jimmy with a glance. Still running. Still loud. Laura broke another leader next. He was animated, yelling, hands wide, they always make the cleanest targets. Her reticle cut his sternum. Squeeze. Thunder again. He dropped and the fighters around him ducked by reflex. Morales didn't waste the window. Push, he barked. 2 more bounds, then redress. Jimmy shifted fire like a metronome, feeding Ethan and the left team seconds at a time. Ryan kept the net alive, voice dry but clipped, element is pinned but moving, unknown friendly sniper providing overwatch, priority, machine gun nests on high shelves. He heard Patterson's reply. Acknowledge, maintain pressure, conserve ammunition. The enemy tried to tighten the noose. A machine gun on the right shelf woke up, deeper rhythm, the kind that pins whole lines. Morales recognized the sound and felt his gut go cold. He was about to redirect Jimmy when the right shelf flashed in Laura's glass. She measured quick, distance, drop, the fat mirage over hot stone, and let the reticle sit just high of the gunner's cheek. Squeeze. The Barrett cracked, and the big gun skipped into silence, its team rolling for cover. Laura breathed once, tasted dust, and crawled 2 feet to lighten the chance of return fire. Ethan's world opened for a heartbeat. He saw where Jimmy's rounds chewed, saw rock split like glass, saw the lane to a better pocket of cover. He slapped Ryan's arm, moving, and slid out, keeping his head low, scraping elbows, rifle up as he dropped into the new notch. He took aim slower this time, pressed the trigger in the rhythm the cadre drilled, and watched a muzzle flash wink out mid-burst. Didn't know if it was his. Didn't need to know. He shouted his lane clear for a second and felt the word come out stronger than it should have. Ryan's radio spat static, then Patterson, negative air on immediate, ground QRF rerouting, stand by. He wanted to say stand by to what? He didn't. Copy. Still engaged, still advancing by bounds. He looked at Morales. The sergeant's eyes were ice. Keep them honest, he said, and swung his rifle to stitch the top line of an emplacement that had gone quiet but not empty. Across the ridge, the ambushers started throwing grenades short, hoping angle would do the work. 2 clattered and blew dust, concussion-thumping ribs. Jimmy cursed once, low, and raked the shelf until stone chipped into a curtain. Morales felt time change. He knew the point in a fight where you're just living and the point where a shape appears, an edge, a way you might walk out. He felt it forming around the boom from above. He didn't call it hope. He called it math getting better. Laura saw a spotter crawl where the first leader fell, a scope sneaking the edge. She took the half-second to be sure. Squeeze. Glass broke, and the spotter went limp, the rifle clattering down the slope. She shifted again, drank a warm swallow from the tube on her rig, and checked the wind one more time. It had swung light from the west. She rolled that into the next prep without thinking. Morales caught movement high left, 2 figures low running to a rock lip big enough to hide a belt fed. He started to move Jimmy's barrel and Laura beat him to it. First man folded, second man flinched, and a third, who thought he was unseen, crouched to grab the weapon. Squeeze. 3 down. Morales used it like it was planned. 2 bounds and a slide into a crease with angle on the left shelf. The squad's shape went from straight line to a crooked wedge that bit back. Ethan's breathing found a groove. He wasn't comfortable. He wasn't safe. But he was in the fight, and the noise didn't own him anymore. He watched for elbows, for shoulders, for the small mistakes men make when they think the other side can't touch them. He fired less and saw more. Patterson's board steadied on green-yellow instead of red. Grant stood off her shoulder. He asked one question, friendly Overwatch ID. She shook her head. Unknown. Effective. He allowed himself one nod. Leave her on the net as a ghost. Don't drag time hunting a name. The canyon kept chewing up minutes, and the sun kept climbing. Ammo counts dropped, but not to panic. Morales rotated shooters without ceremony, kept the left hot, cooled the center, cut the right when Laura opened a lane. Jimmy's barrel smoked, and he swapped it with the discipline of someone who'd done it in worse places. Ryan's voice came like checks on a list, bound complete, 2 wounded walking, 1 grazed, all guns up, pushing. Enemy fire thinned and then spiked, angry and wild. They were trying to find Laura by sound and failing. They overshot her last position. She was already somewhere else, still on the same patch of stone, but shifted enough that noise lied for her. She didn't talk. She didn't need to. Morales leaned into the rock and looked at his line. He could hear his men again, short calls, not yelling. He could feel space in the fight where there had been none. He looked toward the next shelf and pointed with 2 fingers. We're taking that lip, he said, and the word came out like a decision instead of a wish. Ryan keyed up, voice level. Element is maneuvering to seize high shelf. Unknown friendly Overwatch continues to engage effectively. Request you track our push. Patterson answered that she had them, that QRF was still minutes out, that they were it for now. Copy, he said. Understood. Ethan wiped grit from his mouth with the back of his glove. He nodded at Jimmy, who nodded back, simple and fast. Morales raised his hand to show the count. 1. 2. On 3, they'd move. On 3, they'd trust the thunder on the ridge to cut the worst of it. He watched the second hand on a beat-up watch sweep a notch and thought, just keep moving. He dropped his hand. The squad broke from cover. And from the ridge, the Barrett answered, and then answered again, a steady drumbeat that carved seconds out of chaos. Morales felt the air change as the rounds from above cut lanes open that didn't exist a heartbeat before. He drove the wedge hard, boots sliding on grit, shoulders skimming rock, shouting short commands that snapped the squad forward. Jimmy hosed a burst to pin a shelf, then snapped the bipod free and moved in a crouch that looked impossible with that much steel. Ethan ran the inside line, close to the wall, counting the steps to the next fold of stone where he could breathe and shoot. High right, a new rhythm joined in, deeper, meaner. A belt fed they hadn't seen yet, tucked under a slab at a bad angle. The fire chopped the air flat and made the canyon feel smaller. Morales swore, recognized the kill zone intent, and pointed with his muzzle, Jimmy, right shelf, smoke it. Jimmy slammed into a knee, set the bipod, and laid out a ripping curtain that kept heads down but didn't kill the gun. They needed a break on that lip or they'd bleed out in place. Laura rolled an inch, enough to change the geometry that the enemy guessed at. Through the shimmer she read the gun team, loader's elbow crowding the feed, gunner's cheek too high above the trunnion. She let wind, math and mirage pull together until the reticle floated on the thin strip of exposed face. Squeeze. The gun coughed once and quit. She worked the bolt by feel, shifted a palm width again, and watched the loader drag the weapon. Squeeze. The loader folded. She exhaled slow and counted her remaining rounds like a metronome only she could hear. Ryan's radio cracked back to life. Patterson, firm voice under pressure, ground QRF diverted by washout, air delayed, maintain momentum, report ammo state. Ryan scanned quick. Green-yellow on rifle, yellow on saw, one man grazed. Advancing. He didn't bother the net for comfort. He kept it factual because facts kept people alive. The enemy adapted. A pair sprinted to a broken pillar and snapped an RPG up with the impatience of men who wanted a quick end. Morales saw the tube angle and didn't have a shot. Ethan did. He forced his breathing into a smaller space, pressed the trigger once, watched the rock in front of the gunner spit dust, corrected a hair, pressed again. The man lurched, the tube skittered, the backblast hissed into useless smoke. Ethan didn't celebrate. He slid behind the stone and waited for the reply that always came. It came ugly. A cluster of grenades rolled short from high left, skipped off edges, and popped in a ragged wave that rattled ribs. Fragment kissed Jimmy's forearm and tore a line through his sleeve. He barked a word and kept firing, left hand slick on the feed bag. Morales checked him with a quick glance, still good, and ordered a hand switch on barrels at the next lull. They were burning heat into the steel faster than they could throw it away. Laura caught the last grenade thrower by his mistake. He stood to see his work. She clipped him at the collarbone and he went back like a string cut. Another fighter lifted a scope and Laura felt that prickle you get when glass stares back. She slid down the rock until the scope's tiny sun didn't line up with anything human and waited. When the enemy's barrel edged forward, she feathered the trigger. The report cracked through stone, and the counter-sniper's rifle chimed its last against the shelf. She didn't smile. She counted wind again. She didn't let the canyon teach her habits. Morales used the new quiet like it was a rope. Bound. 2 and 2. We're peeling this wall. Ryan echoed it automatic, voice a beat behind. Ethan and another rifleman jumped, low and fast, gravel sifting down the wall in miniature slides. They landed in a long scoop of shadow, and for 3 seconds it felt like the canyon forgot them. Ethan marked 2 angles in his head and held them both, flicking eyes, not muzzle. On Patterson's floor, Grant stepped closer to the board. What's holding the air? Heat and routing, Patterson said, eyes never leaving the feed lines. We'll get fast movers overhead but not at task time we want. He nodded once, less at her and more at the world. Keep them on the rails. She acknowledged and trimmed her tone even flatter when she keyed, Ridgewell element, Thor flight inbound but late. You own Redstone. Keep buying ground. The enemy tried to buy it back with panic. A cell slid down a goat trail the squad hadn't clocked, angled to rake the wedge from behind a jut of stone. Morales didn't see them first. Jimmy did, because Jimmy always checked his flanks between bursts. Rear left, he shouted, muzzle whipping, rounds punching the path. Ethan pivoted, took the trail a half-second late, and stitched it with 3 clean shots that cut the lead man and punched the second's shoulder. The third dove and vanished in a smear of dust. Morales felt the old pride move through fear, his line was seeing. The wind shifted weird. Heat boiled harder off a chalky patch and the mirage turned the far shelf into a ghost with extra elbows. Laura clicked 2 notches she didn't like but trusted, then put a round through a sliver of forehead that Mirage tried to hide. The body dropped wrong, like a puppet off a rail. She slid back down her rock, checked her rig, counted 8 rounds in the mag, 2 mags left. Not bad. Not lavish. Ryan's antenna clipped stone as he leaned to call a new grid for a mortar attempt he could taste coming. He didn't get the word mortar out before the first tube thumped dull and a round came in dirty, clipped by terrain, breaking in a heavy smack 20 meters long of where they'd been. Dust turned noon into twilight. Morales moved the line again, cold and simple, shift right, now, and they were gone before the second round bloomed over stale coordinates. They're shooting stale smoke, Jimmy grinned through grit. Let's keep it stale. Ethan found a rhythm inside the noise. He counted Morales's beats, timed his peaks with the Barrett's thunder, let Jimmy's hammering lay a floor he could walk on one step at a time. He surprised himself when he realized he was talking out loud, not to anyone, just to the canyon, a series of soft marks, left shelf elbow, down, next shadow, hold. The words made his hands precise. Laura tracked a heavy gun team trying to reman the dead spot. The loader crawled, the gunner crawled, the barrel crawled, and for a second they looked like one long animal fighting stone. She put around where that animal's head would be if animal were a man. Stone spattered. The gunner slumped and slid. The loader froze too long and paid the second price. She breathed and let her heartbeat settle back where it belonged. Morales touched Ethan's shoulder as he slid in. "You're doing fine." It wasn't a speech. It was a measurement. Ethan nodded, said nothing, and pushed 2 more feet to catch an angle into a slot where someone kept trading blind shots for time. He waited for the next blind and ended it with a precise press. The slot stayed quiet. Ryan finally got a crackle from Thor flight, ghosting the tops of the hills on a far route. He pinned them to a box pattern, had them hold, told them nothing they could use yet, pressed them to listen for grid in 30 seconds or not at all. "Copy hold," the pilot said, even and distant. Ryan turned back to stone and men and sweat and a watch that ran on different numbers. The canyon fought back one more hard spike. 3 positions woke in a triangle they hadn't charted, throwing crisscross fire that tried to sew the wedge in place. Morales felt the stitch and refused it. He pointed the needle at the place where triangles break, one corner that holds the others. "That post," he barked. "Kill that post." Jimmy dragged the muzzle, Ethan leaned out of cover like he meant it, and Laura wrote the period on the sentence from a mile of air and heat. The corner blew out of the triangle and the other 2 lost their aim. Time stretched thin and then thick again, the way it does when you teach a bad place to let you pass. Ammo went yellow across the line, red on a handful of mags that Morales redistributed without theater. Sweat turned dust to paste on faces and hands. The sun made a second canyon out of glare. But the math kept improving. The shelf they wanted was close enough now that Morales could smell the oil on the sandbags. "Last bound," he said. He didn't raise his voice. Everyone heard him. "On thunder." Ryan repeated it into the net out of habit more than need. Ethan wiped grit from his lip with the back of a glove that was more mud than fabric and looked to Jimmy. Jimmy nodded once, blade straight. Laura set the reticle where it would open the seam widest, listened to wind that never stopped talking, and counted down in silence with the same numbers Morales used. 3, 2, 1. The Barrett answered, louder, closer, final enough to sound like a door unlocking. Morales pushed. The squad rose out of stone like it belonged there, crossed the last strip of bad ground, and hit the sandbag lip with boots and elbows and will. The shelf fractured under them, and for the first time since the canyon snapped awake, Redstone felt like it might let go, and then the canyon clawed back. A fresh belt-fed woke from deep left, angry and close, chopping the air into flat sheets that pinned the squad to the sandbag lip they just won. Tracers burned low across boots and rock, stitching sparks that hopped like insects. Morales slammed into cover, face dusted white, and pointed with 2 fingers, source low, undercut, close enough to smell oil. Jimmy crawled the M249 to the edge and fed a brutal rip that pushed the stream up for a breath, not enough. Ethan hugged the ramp of torn sandbags and tasted grit like iron. "That gun's our problem," Morales said without looking back. "Everything else waits." On the ridge, Laura slid further along her notch, elbows screaming from hours of recoil. Her scope found nothing but heat boil where the new gun hid beneath a slab. She tracked for parts, knuckles, belt link shine, the faint sway of a barrel under tension. Wind walked sideways and then steadied. She dialed a half-click and held where the world told her nothing and her math told her everything. Squeeze. The Barrett's thunder hit the canyon like a door kicked in. In her glass, the belt jumped, a feed arm stuttered, the gun dipped. Not dead. She worked the bolt, slid a palm-width reticle back to the seam. Squeeze. The gun spit 2 last insults and went quiet as rock. Go, Laura whispered to nobody, breath shaking once, then gone. Morales heard the silence that mattered. Push the trench, he snapped. Ethan was up first, over the lip, shoes skidding, Jimmy right behind, gun high, barrel smoking. They spilled into the shallow scooped trench where bodies and brass and busted cloth sandbags made a cruel floor. 2 fighters rose on reflex and Ethan put them down on a double tap that sounded too clean in the mess. Ryan dropped in next, weapon up, antenna snagging and tearing free, voice already cutting to Patterson, advancing onto first shelf. Heavy weapon neutralized. Still engaged, multiple. The canyon answered with a new problem. A crack, single, sharp, cold, slapped stone over Morales's ear and chipped his helmet rail. Glass, he said, calm and flat. Counter sniper. He grabbed Ethan by the strap and pushed him lower. Laura had felt it the same second, an echo that didn't belong to her rifle, lean and fast, the kind that hunts for officers' faces and radio antennas. She didn't shift yet. She closed the scope half a hair and let the world's edges fall away until the shelf became a map of shadow. There. A coin of glass where no rock grew, coins, tucked back under a chalk overhang. The angle was bad. The shot was bad. She slid deeper into dust and found a cut in the rock that let her flatten another inch. Breath. Pressure. Squeeze. The round smacked stone an inch short. Mirage lied. She didn't blink. She clicked a quarter, trusted the wind she could feel on her teeth, and sent the follow-up into the coin. The echo came back wrong, the counter's rifle pinged and then clattered, and something folded deeper into chalk. Dead? Maybe. Dead enough. Laura crawled 2 more feet because habits keep you alive when luck gets credit. Morales took the gap. Wedge right. Clean this shelf. Jimmy walked the muzzle, disciplined bursts that cut talk before it became fire. Ethan and Ryan took angles, clearing the pockets where fear tends to hide, behind stacked ammo, behind men who look asleep. A fighter lunged from a split in the wall with a knife that flashed once. Ethan blocked on his sling, felt the blade chew nylon instead of skin, drove an elbow hard enough to stop argument, and finished it the way the cadre taught him when no yard line existed. He breathed in, the air stung, his hands didn't shake. Patterson's voice cut clean across the chaos. Ridgewell, Thor flight now on station, 1 minute from push, danger close capable. Mark or grid? Ryan gave grid in a string that came like a song he practiced, eyes never leaving his sights. Morales shook his head once, negative mark. We're too woven in. Patterson didn't argue. Copy no mark. Hold Thor overhead. You've got long gun cover and time for 1 more bound. The enemy made their last try like men spending everything in a single breath. 3 cells surged from a ravine slit beyond the first shelf, firing from the hip, voices raw, trying to shove the Marines off the lip they had bled to take. Jimmy braced, barrel already swapped, ripped the lead edge into mist. Ethan took the right flank, found a knee under a robe and made it still. Ryan punched bursts across chest lines that kept faces down. Morales rose enough to drag 2 men forward and slammed them into a new crease with boot and curse and promise. The push slowed, stuttered, then tried to turn, and Laura broke its spine, 1 leader with a red scarf, 1 heavy who kept standing, 1 brave idiot who thought movement made him safe. 3 shots. 3 thunders. The rush became a heap. Silence didn't come, it never does. Noise just got smaller, closer, personal. Morales felt it in his teeth, the moment where you decide the day. He looked at the second shelf, at the last real gun pit that raked the canyon's throat. If they owned that, Redstone was finished. If they didn't, the canyon would keep its teeth. He didn't ask permission. We take the top, he said, as if it were a thing on a list. On thunder. Jimmy, left cut. Ethan, with me. Ryan, net alive. Laura heard the words he didn't send. She put her reticle on the corner that would wake the pit if fear failed to. Wind took a breath. The sun slid behind a thin veil that flattened glare for a heartbeat. Now, Morales said. He moved. Ethan moved. Jimmy pinned. Ryan's voice counted numbers that aren't on watches. Laura's shot cracked the corner apart and the pit flinched. Morales and Ethan climbed like men who had practiced this wall in nightmares, hands on rock, rifles shoved ahead, elbows up, knees screaming. A fighter popped high and Ethan's muzzle found his teeth before his eyes could widen. Morales hit the lip, hauled himself over with a small stunned grunt, and met the gunner's barrel with his own at distances nobody writes about. The first man to move would die. Laura didn't have an angle. She couldn't help him. Morales moved first. He slammed his rifle into the gun, knocked the muzzle off his chest, and drove forward, shoulder to sternum, hip to rock. The gunner buckled and Morales finished it with the short violence that lives in muscle memory. Another fighter grabbed for the free end of the belt. Ethan cleared the lip, saw hands and belt and mouth and fired 2 tight rounds that broke all 3. Jimmy's fire stitched the back wall. Dust flooded the pit and turned the air to soup. Morales coughed once, spit grit, and planted his boot on the pivot of the heavy, turning it outward like a door. Guns ours, he said, voice raw but steady. Down canyon. Now. Ryan marked the shift on the net. Patterson's breath let out in a line he couldn't hear. Thor asked softly if the world had a place for them yet. Ryan told them to hold their altitude and keep their eyes, because ground had it in hand. The last pockets of fire broke like twigs. Men who had shouted an hour ago now mumbled prayers to rock. Some ran, most tried to disappear into seams that didn't exist anymore. Laura didn't chase cowards. She watched for the one threat that still knew how to aim. It didn't show. She finally let her cheek come off the stock and flexed fingers that felt carved from stone. Morales stood in the gun pit and took it all in, the shelf, the lip, the trench below, the dogleg that had wanted them dead at breakfast. He looked at Ethan, whose face was young and old in the same minute, and nodded once. No speech, no slap on the shoulder, just the quiet math of pride that doesn't need noise. Jimmy dropped into the pit, sat heavy for 2 seconds, then laughed once, hard and short, like a cough turned inside out. Thought we'd be bones here, he said. Not today, Morales answered. Ryan's radio gave Patterson back to them. Ridgewell, status. Ryan looked at Morales, who glanced at Laura's ridge on instinct he couldn't explain, then said, top shelf secure. Enemy breaking. We're consolidating. Patterson's reply was softer than doctrine. Copy. Hold what you took. Wind came back, cooler by a degree, as if the canyon had decided to breathe like a thing that forgives. Laura rolled onto her side and stared at the sky until the world stopped pulsing. She counted the magazines left and the lives that went with them. She could hear the team below, not words, just the cadence of men moving like they were allowed to live again. Morales keyed the local push-to-talk and didn't say much. Reset ammo. Check each other. We're not done until it says we are. Ethan peeled a torn sling off his vest and laughed under his breath when he saw the knife groove, thin and mean, in the webbing. He threaded a spare, cinched it, and looked out over Redstone from a height that didn't belong to the enemy anymore. The canyon didn't go quiet, but the fight lost its teeth. The shelf belonged to them, the heavy turned with their hands, the last rifles below firing more out of habit than plan. Morales let the second stretch. He waited for the trick, the late shot, the last grenade, the prideful push meant to make a point. It didn't come. Redstone, at last, let go, so they took the breath the canyon had denied and turned it into work. Morales didn't celebrate. He split the shelf into sectors, posted guns where the angles mattered, and put hands on shoulders in quick passes that said keep your head, check your buddy, reload before you're empty. Ethan rolled a fresh mag, tapped it, tugged it, and looked down the run of stone that had tried to eat them. Below, pockets of fire sputtered like wet matches. Jimmy fed a final measured burst to quiet a stubborn echo, then lifted his hand to cool the barrel. Clear enough, he said, which in his mouth meant nothing is ever clear, just less bad. Ryan keyed the net. Ridgewell secure on second shelf. Enemy elements disengaging. Request medevac window and resupply route. Patterson's voice came back steady, threaded with something like relief she wouldn't name. Copy secure. Thor remains on hold. QRF rerouted, ETA now 10. Medevac bird spinning at Ridgewell. Send 9 lines when you can talk. Ryan glanced at Morales, who nodded once and pointed to a patch of flat rock where radio could live for a minute without catching a stray. Laura lay on her back for 3 breaths, feeling her heartbeat crawl out of her ears, then slid the rifle into the crook of her arm and scanned again. She didn't trust quiet until it forgot your name. In her glass, she watched stress drip off movements, shoulders lowering, helmets tilting back a hair, hands staying businesslike but less white-knuckled. She counted her rounds again, 1 partial, 1 full, and kept the scope on the seams where pride likes to make a last mistake. Morales moved the line into a consolidation shape, L across the shelf, gun at the hinge, rifles watching the spillways where a wounded enemy might try to buy revenge. Water, he said, and canteens clicked. Ethan took a slow pull that tasted like hot steel and dust and life. He wiped his mouth with a dirty glove and checked Jimmy's bandage. The graze had crusted, ugly but small. Keep it wrapped, Ethan said, and Jimmy snorted. Yes, Mom. The first real sound of relief was mechanical, rotor thunder, distant and patient. Thor flight orbited higher, sunlight flashing off wings as they traced circles over someone else's problem set. Ryan kept them on the leash, standby, we're good, and felt the weight of saying no to help because taking it wrong could hurt more. He built the 9 lines for 2 litters and 3 ambulatory. Names later. Right now, positions and wounds and what the LZ would be if the wind didn't shift. Down the slope, 2 fighters tried to crawl a casualty out of a pocket. Morales saw the movement, tracked it, and held his shot. He wasn't building a tally. Hold, he said. Let them go. Ethan blinked. He understood and didn't at the same time. He lowered his muzzle and watched dust swallow them. There are days you take what the field gives, and days you let something leave so your men don't catch a round of spite. Laura eased her cheek back to the stock. A flash of glass in a far cleft pulled her eye. Not a scope, a bottle. Her finger relaxed. For the first time, she let herself think forward, down from the perch, into the heat, to the shelf where voices she'd guarded would sound like people instead of radio traffic. She kept watching anyway. Pride makes fools at the end. Patterson passed a clean path for the QRF, Ridgewell, convoy on the North Rim Road, coming from the Wash Detour, 5 vehicles, 1 medical. LZ mark optional. Thor can cover ingress. Morales chose no smoke. We'll wave them in, he said. Dust is its own mark. He sent Ryan and a rifleman to flag the approach with panels and a mirror. Jimmy dragged ammo belts into a neat serpentine and stacked empties for count. Ethan started a slow walk along the inner face of the shelf, boot to boot with anyone who wanted a check on hands that still shook. The canyon returned sounds it had stolen, the clack of mags, the rip of tape, low words that live in the space after dying misses. Morales felt his jaw unclench for the first time. He looked up to the ridge out of habit and didn't see her, of course he didn't, but he let the glance become a quiet thanks anyway. Some debts don't live on paper. The QRF arrived in a billow of tan and engine heat, doors thumping, medics hopping out with bags that rattled like metal rain. The team's lieutenant jogged up, helmet pushed back just enough to show eyes wide with the fact of the shelf still standing. Status, he asked. Morales gave it to him clean and quick, secure top, sporadic below, no contact on flanks, we own the heavy, 3 WIA, all green to move if needed, and pointed medics where hands were already raised. The lieutenant nodded, then looked over Morales's shoulder at the view that said a lot about the last hour without saying anything at all. Hell of a place to be alive, he murmured. You have no idea, Jimmy said, not unkind. Ryan pushed 9 lines up the pipe. Patterson stamped them, spun birds, and let a small word leak, good work. Grant stood with his hands flat on the console, eyes on the green that had been read. Bring them home, he told nobody, and meant all of them, even the ones who would only ride halfway. Laura finally slid the Barrett into its bag. The world seemed loud without the stock against her face. She swept her tarp into a tight roll, policed brass out of habit she taught herself, and began the careful climb that doesn't disrespect gravity. The wind talked to the canyon in a softer language now. A hawk tipped a wing and drifted away from the sun. On the shelf, Morales made the call he'd been saving. We're not chasing ghosts, he said. We hold, we hand off, we walk out the way we came, heads up. Ethan felt the words sink. He had a picture of pushing further, of finding the place where the ambush started and writing his name over it. He let it go. The field had already told them what mattered. Medevac rotors reached into Redstone and pulled at hair and loose cloth. 2 litters lifted with straps that hummed like guitar strings, medics talking that calm, flat talk of people who measure minutes in blood pressure and airways. The birds slid, tilted, and climbed into heat, the canyon shrank them into toy machines and then forgot them. When Laura stepped onto the shelf, no one cheered. Heads turned, and a silence that wasn't awkward found her. Morales met her halfway with dust all over his face and something like a smile hiding under it. He didn't offer a speech. He offered his hand. She took it, gripped firm for exactly the seconds respect eats and no longer. Ethan stood a step back, didn't trust his voice, and settled for a nod so earnest it felt like a salute. Jimmy tapped the side of his helmet and said, "Good thunder." Laura's mouth twitched. You kept it standing. Ryan brought her into the net with the smallest tilt of the antenna, as if introducing a signal to a family. Overwatch on the ground, he told Patterson. There was a pause, then, copy. Tell her Fort Bragg owes coffee. Laura looked at the sky and shook her head once like coffee was a big thing and a small one at the same time. They held until the world truly stopped twitching. Panels came down. Heavy got safed. Counts got written in grease pencil on a rock because paper breaks when you need it. Morales took a last walk of the line, touching stone, counting faces without counting. He paused at the lip and let his eyes run the path back out of Redstone, the dogleg, the bad seam, the place where everything had moved at once. He didn't ask why they were still on their feet. He already knew. Patterson cleared the road home. Grant stepped back from the board and let the room exhale. Thor tipped a wing and drifted to another orbit. The QRF buttoned up. Morales lifted his hand, and the squad rose, smaller by weight and larger by whatever you call the thing that fills a man after he gives most of what he has and gets to keep breathing. The march out wasn't pretty. It was quiet and exact. They stepped around the places where echoes live and didn't talk much. The sun slid down the canyon wall, taking heat with it in thin slices. A shadow moved on a high ridge and turned into a deer that stared, blinked, and vanished. At the mouth of the dogleg, Morales halted them. He looked back the way you do when a place has tried to write your ending and failed. Ethan followed his gaze and saw nothing magic, just rock and dust and shelves and a line cut through both by boot soles. He felt tired down to bones he hadn't known he owned. He felt clear. Laura didn't look back. She looked ahead, to the ridge line she'd return to if the board ever put Redstone under the green lights again. She rolled her shoulder once, felt the bruise like a metal no one would pin, and fell in with the squad at a distance that kept her what she'd been all day, near enough to matter, far enough to do it again if the canyon changed its mind. Behind them, Redstone held its breath and then let it out. Ahead, the road to Ridgewell waited, dust, rattling armor, sore feet, warm water that tasted like a gift. The worst was behind them. The lesson was not finished. It followed them onto the road out, into the slow rattle of armor and the dry slap of wind against faces that had forgotten softness for a while. Ridgewell's low tents and antenna masts grew out of the heat shimmer like a mirage that refused to disappear, and the squad walked the last stretch with that strange quiet that settles after a storm, a silence that isn't empty, just full of things you don't say yet. Morales kept the pace even and the spacing clean, eyes on the margins the whole way because habits earn survivors. Ethan felt each step through boots that had turned dust into mud, shouldered his rifle like it was lighter than it was, and learned the weight all over again when the motor pool finally took it from his hands. Camp had the sound of normal, generators humming, a radio laughing at a joke from somewhere, the snap of a flag in a wind that had cooled by a degree. Medics did what medics do, counted, rapped, wrote, moved. Supply did their dance with forms and pallets. The stink of hot Gatorade and diesel folded into everything. Ryan handed off the last of the paperwork and let the net go quiet in his ear, the silence a shock he absorbed in small sips. Jimmy sat on a crate and peeled the bandage away from his graze long enough to grumble that it looked meaner than it was, then let a doc tape him back together with the indifference of a man who'd already moved on to tomorrow's gun cleaning. Laura checked her rifle in the long light behind the maintenance line, not because anyone asked, but because it was what came next. The Barrett lay across a table that had seen too many bolts, and she ran her hands over its pieces like she was reading a book no one else owned. A bruise colored her shoulder darker than the rest of her, an honest coin paid to the day. She rolled it once under a palm and let the ache name itself. She looked out at the camp and didn't look long. Being seen had never been the job. Patterson's voice came from a tent where it moved because fans forced it. The debrief wasn't ceremonial. It was a line of facts laid on a table and sorted until they made a shape you could point at. Grant stood at the back with a coffee that had turned old and didn't care. Morales spoke plain, hitting each beat in order: contact at the dogleg, ambush from both shelves, unknown overwatch becoming known by effect, bound by bound push to the first lip, counterglass cleared, final take of the top pit, consolidate, handoff, walk out. He didn't dress it. He didn't round it off. He said the names of the wounded and the names of the men who pulled them and stopped there. They asked Laura in because the board likes to hear from the ridge. She came in without ceremony and took a spot near the map where the dogleg knifed the canyon in two. Patterson asked 2 questions about wind and angle. Laura answered them like a checklist: early cross at 2 o'clock, mirage heaviest over the chalk, counterglass under the overhang, shot 1 short because heat lied, correction by quarter and teeth wind. Grant listened to the way she used nouns and not adjectives and nodded in that slow way commanders do when skill and luck sit on the same chair and refuse to fight. Outside, the camp did a small, clumsy thing that war sometimes allows. A cook found extra eggs in a pan that still pretended to be non-stick, and someone brought out tortillas and a bottle of something that once said hot sauce. The food didn't taste good. It tasted like not dying. Ethan ate in that dazed, grateful way of men who discovered hunger after forgetting it for hours. He kept catching himself watching Laura across the yard, just a person in dust and sweat like the rest of them, nothing else to tell you she'd been thunder on a ridge. He raised his canteen in a movement so small it barely happened. She didn't see it. It didn't matter. Night pushed down on Ridgewell with a tired hand. The squad drifted to cots and chairs and stretches of earth that felt like memory foam after stone. A mechanic somewhere swore at a bolt. A medic laughed once at a line in a letter. Ryan lay back with his headset off and heard the electricity in the wires and the way his pulse had learned to be normal again. Jimmy propped his feet on a crate and fell asleep in mid-sentence. Morales walked the perimeter on reflex, nodded to a sentry who nodded back, then stood alone by a stack of water cans and watched the camp breathe. He thought of the math, the way seconds had become currency, traded for distance, for angles, for lives. He thought of the moment the heavy turned outward under his hands and the way the canyon changed its mind in that breath. He thought about not much else, because men who lead don't give themselves permission to unpack it all at once. He lifted his eyes to the ridge he couldn't see in the dark and gave one more quiet thank you he would never say out loud. Morning came clean and unkind, as it always does, telling you you're still here and asking what you'll do with it. The squad did the unglamorous, cleaned weapons, logged rounds, patched straps, wrote the kind of reports nobody reads until the day they have to. Ethan took longer than anyone with his sling, sliding new webbing through the points where a knife had said hello. He ran a finger over the groove like you touch a scar that belongs to someone you used to be. He didn't keep the ruined strap. He didn't throw it away either. He tucked it under the tray in his footlocker as if it might be the only diploma he ever wanted. Orders rolled in like they always do. Patrol tomorrow, different sector, same map with new red grease pencil. Patterson briefed it while the coffee burned fresh mistakes out of mugs. Grant signed the page that moved Thor somewhere else. The room turned from yesterday to next without a stutter. That is how you survive this job, by being faithful to the routine that keeps you human. Before the day split them into teams and tasks, Morales gathered the squad where a strip of shade pretended to be generous. He didn't speech. He balanced praise and correction the way you balance on a narrow ledge, weight forward, eyes up. Ethan, tighten your corner checks by one beat. Ryan, good net discipline, don't let anyone pull you long. Jimmy, swap barrels earlier than your pride wants. We lived because we moved with our thunder. We'll live next time because we move without it if we have to. Heads on swivels. Feet under you. That was all. It was enough. Laura stood off to the side with a cup that steamed like it meant well. Patterson walked by, paused, and said the thing headquarters says when they mean it. Coffee's on us if you ever make Fort Bragg in person. Laura's mouth tilted. Copy. It was as close to a yes as she gave. She finished the cup, set it down, and thumbed the bruise on her shoulder with a pressure that told her how far she could push today and still be right tomorrow. Word about Redstone moved the way word always moves, crooked, fast, editing itself into a story that fit the camp's need for a legend. The sniper on the ridge became bigger than a person, and the squad that climbed into the teeth became braver with each retelling. Morales didn't correct anyone. Ryan let the radio chatter have its mythology. Jimmy laughed when someone said the heavy pit had been taller than a house and didn't say it wasn't. Ethan listened to it all and kept the one true story he owned inside, how fear got small enough to step over when thunder made space. When the sun climbed to the angle that said go, they went. New grid, same boots, same habits. Laura walked toward the high ground with her pack riding easy against a spine that knew the climb. Morales hefted his rifle and set his face in that quiet shape that keeps men steady. Ryan slid the headset on like a promise. Jimmy patted the gun as if apologizing for yesterday's heat. Ethan checked his sling twice and then stopped checking and let his hands hang loose. They passed the sign that said Ridgewell in paint that had lost fights with sand and time. The road bent. The desert opened like a book that refused to end. Behind them, Redstone shrank to a story they would carry. Ahead of them, a different canyon waited with its own mouth and its own pride. The lesson followed, but it didn't weigh them down. It rode near the heart, light as a coin in a pocket, heavy as a debt you're proud to owe. They didn't look back this time. They didn't need to. The ridge would always be there, a line against the sky, a promise that when the canyon wakes mean and the air turns to teeth, there is a place where thunder can start and a way to walk through if you keep your head and your feet in your hands, and if one person with patience and steel decides the math will favor you today. That was the whole thing. That was enough.